I'm with George Merz. You were in Normandy in 1944. Can you tell us about your experience over there?
Well, I went in on, it was about 5 days after D-Day. And we had an advance party that did come in a few days before I did. And while we were there, I was actually on patrol with a sergeant, and we watched the P-47s bomb the German line and had a good view of it from a little knoll or a high spot where we could actually watch them bomb and strafe the enemy at that time. And I was driving the Jeep, and the sergeant was the commander of the Jeep. So then that was the only time that I ever had the opportunity to drive a vehicle, because most of the motor pool was still on the way in. And that morning I got up and I had an opportunity to do it. And the sergeant's name was Sergeant Elmore. He was a buck sergeant, and I remember him very well because I've actually seen some pictures of him in some of the photographs that they have on TV. And they're actually photographs of the sergeant in Bastogne directing traffic. And I recognized him, his face, because he was one who has a Bronze Star like I do from Bastogne. And his sergeant stripe showed up on there. I had to wait till the sergeant stripe showed up. And when they showed up, I knew who he was exactly, because his features are on that same photograph that I've got during the decorating ceremony in Germany after the war was over.
And after Normandy, you stayed in France?
Yes.
Quite a bit?
And after Normandy, we liberated Normandy, Brittany, Brest, and then Avranches and Coutances in France. Those were the towns that we had liberated. And in the meantime, though, the 101st and the 82nd was attached to our corps, which was the 8th Corps. And we were actually with General Troy H. Middleton's 8th Corps. And we were with the 1st Army when we landed. And then later on, we were changed into the 3rd Army, but that was up in Bastogne when General Patton got there. Okay?
And we are also with Bill Werckman. Yeah. And you spoke about the Battle of the Bulge. And this was your first battle. And when you got to Europe, you arrived in Bastogne for the Battle of the Bulge.
No, well, I started. I came over in the 69th Division, and while in England, they started shelling over in the Battle of the Bulge. So they separated a group, and I happened to be in the group. And then we went across, and then we, those that came in our little group, we were set up there as replacements. And then from then on, that's when my experience with combat but I didn't know where I was, who I was with, until a couple of days later he said, "You are in the 99th Division." So then the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. And what is your experience of Bastogne, of the Battle of the Bulge? What do you remember of it?
Well, I remember the position that I had was on the very front, and it was, I estimate about 15 miles from Bastogne to a point called Elsenborn Ridge. And that's where I stayed for 30 days. And we came in the middle of the night, and we were given shells and told to dig, and we dug all night long, and then until we got daylight, and then the Germans mortar see our dirt, so they start shelling that. So we had to quit, and then start later on. So the rest of my time on the front was holding positions, and uh, uh, we went on patrols, mostly at night. I did, or observation in a point out between the front and the Ardennes forest.
And George, you were also in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes. Well, my main job in the Battle of the Bulge was directing essential traffic that was coming up, and also being able to keep the roads clear from the people that were evacuating. We had a double whammy there, so that we had to work with both. And I was very fortunate. I was able to speak enough French to communicate with the people to let them know what we were needing to do. And when I was there the first time, I had been assigned to a village, and for 3 months I was assigned to this village, and we directed traffic in and out of a ration depot. In the interim, I stayed with a family there because the hotel had run out of rooms for me to stay in. And I had to find, which was lucky, like I say, I spoke enough French that I could speak to the people and find a billet that I could stay in that time. And then from then on, after the 3 months was passed by, then I wound up, the Germans started coming out of the woodwork, more or less the railroad. It was a rail town where the railroad come into, and before they could get in town, they were unloading their vehicles off the trains, cars, so that they could do battle and probably conserve fuel, I guess, for their monstrous tanks that they were building and throwing at us at that time. So we did not have any kind of armor to defend against that, so we were ordered to leave the little town of Gouvy and proceed into the town of Bastogne. And then after that, we had to evacuate Bastogne temporarily so that the airborne could come in and use Bastogne as their headquarters. So after that, we wound up, when that happened, we were in Neufchâteau, which was on the southern flank of the Battle of the Bulge. And then later, we were ordered back into Bastogne for the traffic control and information. And then when that happened, General Patton was ordered to stop what he was doing and come up. And then when that happened, we also, his armor was more or less thrown into the battle, which helped a whole lot to curb the German armor that was almost stilled by that time because of the fuel situation. And he was able to knock a lot of the armor out of theirs. So we were able to kind of change the key effect of the war at that time by General Patton coming up and doing what he does best. And when he came up, I actually had a conversation with him, or he had a conversation with me. He wanted to know where the 101st Airborne headquarters was. And so I told him, and then I started to tell him how to get there. And General Patton, being General Patton, said, "Don't tell me, tell my driver." A very serious way he did it. And so then I realized that I was not going to get to tell that general how to get there. I told him where it was at, but that was it.
And it's also in the Bulge that you received the Bronze Star?
Yes. Well, I was also, while they were shelling Bastogne and they were demanding our surrender of Bastogne, I was in the heart of Bastogne directing traffic, essential military traffic. And while the shelling was going on and they were demanding us surrender Bastogne, that's when I got the Bronze Star, because the sergeant saw me on duty at that time in the inclement weather, ice and snow on the roads. I was there doing my job the best I could do. And there was no way I could have found shelter. And when I was able to get to shelter, I would have had to left my post. So I was still on my post, and he saw it, and so he wound up writing a story up on it, and I got the Bronze Star Medal from that. And I had a little bit of a shrapnel wound, but it wasn't too bad, and I was able to treat it myself, and I never did report it. So there were people that were more seriously wounded than what I was, so that's one reason I never reported it. I knew that they needed to be treated almost immediately, and that I would have taken up a lot of time for their doctors and so on to deal with me, and what I had was not really serious.
And to come back to you, Bill, after the Battle of the Bulge, what did you do? Where did you go?
After the Battle of the Bulge, I was in the hospital in Paris for 30 days, and after you got back on your feet, I had frozen feet. I almost lost my feet, but luckily I got out of it and usable. So I was sent back to the front to go join my unit. Well, we were headed for the Remagen Bridge on the Rhine, and our group coming from the hospital, we were a day late, but because the bridge was fell down, it was demolished into the water, and then so we went across on pontoon bridges. And we went over to the Autobahn and under an overpass and told to wait here, your company will pick you up. Well, while I'm sitting there waiting for a company to pick me up, they came from the cannon company and announced, is there anybody here from the field artillery? Well, I went to field artillery school. So I jumped up and I got the job. So then, from then on, I was in Cannon Company until the end of the war.
And you were in Germany as well?
Sure, yes. Well, we went all through Germany after we went across the Rhine.
It's the same for you as well. You went on.
Well, yes, I crossed at Remagen, where he's talking about, and with the Third Army at that time. We were attached to the Third Army. And from then on, while we went on across Germany and went all the way to Yugoslavia, and that's where we met the Russians. And we had a lot of German troops to guard. They were prisoners of war, of course, and we treated them as such. And unlike what they did, some of us in Bastogne, you know. So it was a great day for us to get that thing done and over with.
And how did you two meet?
We met at this particular outing, I call it. So, because I didn't come here as to celebrate this because I really didn't know too much about it. So, because my experience was in the Battle of the Bulge over in Belgium, and it was about as close as you could get, and we went on night patrols days, but at night we had a problem. The Germans would come through the line, and they would somehow, I guess they got the password, but you didn't dare shoot them because some of them they'd have U.S. Uniforms on, and so if you'd known they speak English, these Germans, and they would be cussing out somebody but anyway, they would go and infiltrate the lines and back in the back.
And then you stayed in touch. You continue to see each other.
Well, we met here at this particular reunion in here, and I did know a lot about this because I'd watched it on TV, And my friends who brought me here were very adamant about this particular event. And so when they asked me if I would like to go, I definitely said yes. I appreciate the fact that they invited me, and they're here with me now, and it's a very great trip that I feel like I've been on, and it's just wonderful to have friends like them.
And why it's important for you to come to Europe all the way from the US to participate in those events, in those commemorations?
Well, I had been on the 70th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, which I thought might have been the last one that I was going to attend. And I came over here with 4 of my family members and myself. That was 5 altogether. And I had my oldest son and his wife, and my youngest son and his son, my grandson, and then myself. So we really had a wonderful time then. I had an opportunity to meet General Patton's granddaughter. That was the first time I'd met her. I also had a picture made with her at the tomb site of General Patton in Luxembourg. And then when I actually had the picture made, she leaned over my shoulder and told me that I was her second favorite George. And I really appreciated that because I admired General Patton. I mean, he was kind of a, you know what, a booger, I guess. But to some of the GIs, and he probably, when I talked to him in Bastogne, I could have said, so-and-so treated me that way, and I don't know whether I want to treat him any other way. But I found out that his tacticians, the people that he knew and worked for and worked with, including the general in my corps, were great. They did a great job, a wonderful job, even though we had came to almost the losing end of that thing. We got it out, and we did it and did it right.
Well, same question to you. Why it's important for you to travel and to be here and to participate in those commemorations?
Well, I was asked by the Stumps. I keep getting them mixed up with the Trumps, the President of the United States. Well, anyway, I was invited to come to this affair, and I knew nothing about it because it was out of my thinking, and so that's how come I'm here. I was invited as a guest, so I suppose to tell the people in this area what we were doing over in Belgium to I would say drive the Germans out, which we did.
George, we said before this interview that you have 7 children, 13 grandchildren, 13 great-grandchildren, and more to come. Why it's important for you to tell those stories, your story, the stories of the ones who didn't make it, to this younger generation?
Well, I have one grandson, the one that came with us to Bastogne on the 70th anniversary, and he is very much into this war stories and things like that. So, in fact, the uniform I'm wearing was purchased by my grandson, the son of my youngest son, and he was the one with us in Bastogne when we came over for the first time. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And like I say, I had an opportunity to meet General Patton's granddaughter, Helen, and it was a wonderful trip and a wonderful time. And I've also met her back home in the U.S. when she came over for a military show. I met her then and took pictures, and my grandson, her, and I were in the picture. So it's just been a great opportunity for me. And then again, I met her in Normandy the last time here on the 75th anniversary of the D-Day embattlement. So I was very pleased to have met her then, and also I'd met her again, before that I'd met her in Bastogne on the 74th anniversary. And I have a nice book of General Patton. The book has my name in it. It has to my second favorite George, Merz, and at the bottom it says, "Love, Helen Ayres Patton."
If I may ask you one last question to the two of you, what would be your message when you speak to youngsters during those commemoration? What is the message to them?
Well, my only message that I wish that it had been given more information, maybe in a school or area, but back in South Dakota, where I come from, that's a million miles away from any history like that. So they weren't too interested in it. So
your message is be interested about history, learn about history.
Yeah, if you read about it or something. But it's in the schools in South Dakota's never had any information about the war. And a town of 5,000, which is the capital, we were a small group in that town, but never anything was talked about about the war, and that's what. But I wish that they would have got information earlier, so they had some knowledge of it.
Is it the same message, George, that you convey to the young generations, that to learn about history?
Well, I've had the opportunity to talk to the younger generation from time to time, and it's been a wonderful experience. But like Bill said there, it's kind of hard to deal with when you don't get that information to the youngsters in time and get them early enough to where they can appreciate what all we did do. And that was the very most important thing, to get the word out and let them know that we were here for them and for others. We did a wonderful job, and I was just very pleased to be here. And at the time, I probably was very scared, and I don't deny that. Most everybody, I guess, in wartime is probably a little anxious when things are going good, when things are going bad. So the best you can do is just buck up to it, and like I say, go ahead and teach the youngsters what's going on and what you can do and what you can't do. That's the best.
Well, I have the chance to meet you, and a lot of people out there don't. But I'm sure I can say on behalf of everyone, thank you, because it's always an honor to be speaking to you and to be able to tell your stories on this camera, and then we spread this information, these stories to the public. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you having it, and also the opportunity, for youngsters to get a hold of something like this and be able to read it, I think is very important, tremendously important, because like I say, we're becoming few and far between now, and the longer we're here and be able to tell our stories, even though they may sound a little funny to some people, they were real. And what I'm saying is the best we could do was what we did.